First question is, what do you think is the role of the European Union, but also of the other European countries? And the second question, who are the forces which can internationally or worldwide, which are the governments worldwide, which can help bringing these war-oriented governments to a negotiation table? Are there international governments? Is this India? Is this China? Are we speaking about Turkey? Maybe you can describe a little bit how we can change the forces in the direction of negotiation and ceasefire.
Thank you very much. Let me start with the second question. Most of the world, and I should be more clear, most of the world's governments clearly want peace and are neutral in this conflict between the U.S. and Russia. It's when this war, the war of 2022, exploded in February last year, the U.S. and Europe said, okay, the whole world's aligned against Russian aggression. Well, actually, it wasn't like that. The vast majority of the world's government said, stop the fighting. We don't take sides. We don't join your sanctions. We don't view this as a one-sided affair. China, for example, very responsibly said, negotiate, but respect the security interests of all sides. What that meant was the NATO question. And around the world, most governments did not impose sanctions on Russia. They said, we want an end to the war. We are neither Russia haters nor Ukraine haters. We want the two sides to negotiate. So practically speaking, China, Brazil, India, South Africa, the so-called BRICS countries, together with Russia, those countries are major voices for peace and negotiation, and they should continue to say very clearly that their vision is not to side with one side or the other side, but to side with negotiation and peace. And India has a special role to play. Not only is it a great country and a civilization and 1.4 billion people, but it's the presidency of the G20 this year. And so India has plenty of opportunity to push hard for peace and negotiations. Brazil will host the G20 next year. President Lula is very clear that what is needed right now is not military victory on the battlefield. This is a reckless illusion. What is needed is negotiations and an end to the NATO enlargement. And Brazil will be president of the G20 next year. South Africa, which has said the same, will be president of the G20 in 2025. So I believe that these countries have a huge role to play. I think the African Union should make a strong statement that Africa is being endangered by this war. Africa views this war as a tragedy and an unnecessary one, and as a solvable one as well. So the African Union, I believe, should stand up and be clear. This is the time for peace and for negotiations. Turkey, in my mind, gets a special commendation because President Erdogan has worked very hard during the past year, and his very skillful foreign ministry has worked hard to try to mediate between the two sides. It's not easy to do, but of course, Turkey knows the Black Sea area very well indeed, and should be able to play a very important role. But I would say there's not a government in the world that can't contribute to the momentum of demand for negotiations by saying to the big powers, we do not agree with the approach of winning on the battlefield, because that endangers the whole world. Of course, first and foremost, Ukraine, but actually the entire world with nuclear war. And we demand, therefore, a negotiation now. How can they even think to send tanks right now without even mentioning the word negotiations? Shame on them. Shame.
Thank you so much, Jeffrey. And I have 3 questions from our participants. I will start with a question from my colleague and friend from Ukraine. And he asked, and I will read it shortly to you, the main point. My question is, as economists, can you suggest a way how to deal with structural problems? Militarization of all economies and politics, military-industrial complex, which consumed and corrupted our democracies. I will not continue. I think you understand the question. The second question is to the role of the Vatican peace plans. Are there any following up of these important gathering in June, and what is happening with the peace plan now? Are these ideas for a second conference and an end? And the third one is, they were writing a letter to the Mexican government. What do you think about the Mexican peace plan, the ideas of the Mexican Foreign Ministry, presented to the United Nations in the name of the President of Mexico? So what do you think about the role of Mexico?
Thank you very much. On the first question, this is definitely in part the corruption of our political processes. I can speak about the United States. The U.S. is a government for hire. Our political system is organized around campaign contributions, where lobbyists and major campaign contributors spend billions of dollars and by doing so, essentially buy the policies of the U.S. government. And I have no doubt that the big campaign contributors have played a role in this war. And because what I can tell you is this is not a war that is popular among the U.S. public, or these neocon ideas are not popular or not demanded by the public, even with all the propaganda we receive from the U.S. government. The public is very skeptical. This is a policy in the U.S. driven by a small group of people that have the hands-on levers of power. And so it is not democracy that has brought us to war. It is the corruption of our political institutions. I couldn't agree more. I think that is why our voices are so important, especially with the mainstream media unwilling, unable, I don't understand it, but absolutely not doing their job of holding government to account, but just the opposite, just becoming megaphones for government propaganda. The New York Times, the Washington Post, useless. All they do is report what's